Hello, and a very warm welcome to the latest episode of Extra Time. My name is Charlotte Richardson, and I will be your host as I am joined by two incredible volunteers who are doing an amazing amount of work at a football club called AFC Henley. Our theme for this episode of Extra Time is all around identity, and I will be speaking to Trevor and Rick all about the work that they've been doing at AFC Henley around building that identity to provide football in provision and to develop a fantastic reputation within the local community. So without further ado, who better to tell me all about the football club and its roots than the chairman, Trevor Howell. Trevor, a very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on Extra Time. I've been reading all about the football club. You're around about 24 years old now, I believe, but tell us a bit about how the club was founded and how your role has evolved over time.
Well, the club started actually in 1974. Started as Henley Boys Girls Football Club, and we changed the name to AFC Henley about 15 years ago. I myself have been chairman since 2015. I myself started in the club 24 years ago. That's why you've got the 24 years. When I took my under-7 son down to what was then Henley Boys and Girls Football Club. When we arrived at the ground, we found a coach with a group of boys around him, and we said, "We're here to play football. Can we join?" He said, "Well, I'm moving up to under-8. You have to organise yourselves." And so we, rather surprised, we sort of looked around at each other, and one of my friends said, "Well, I'll take the team then," and somebody else said, "Well, I'll help you." And that's how we started in this kind of muddled way. And I have to confess I was a bit shocked by the lack of organisation and the lack of recruitment process. So we just got on with it. At that time, the club had just one team per age group. There was no real identifiable club kit. We didn't really look like a club. And so I eventually, within a fairly short time, got onto the committee. While I was on the ground, I spent most of my time in the early stages helping the younger age groups get off the ground, because that seemed to be the area that nobody was giving much attention to. Then after a couple of seasons, a competitive soccer school started up in the town at Henley Town Football Club, which is the adult club down the road. And that's all well and good, but how unfortunately it started hitting our younger age groups, because we suddenly found we had very few under-7s coming through, under-8s weren't appearing, and then even the under-9s started dropping in numbers. And so I approached the soccer school guide down the road and said, "Look, why don't we move your brand up to our club and see if we can share the brand and work together?" And he didn't want to play ball, he wasn't interested. So we just approached Reading Football Club and set up on our own. And we invited them to send the coach along. Someone turned up, we had a chat, and we got a grant, bought a few tracksuits, got some blue flags to represent Reading Football Club colours, and we started our own soccer school, which is now what we call the mini soccer centre. And we started with 15 kids, roughly, and over time it started growing. We got 30, 40, 50. We settled at around 70 kids every Saturday morning for quite a while. And we hit over 100 at the end of the pandemic, when people were just so desperate to get onto the playing field. So that's how I got involved. I mean, I've been chairman since 2015, as I said, and it's been quite a long journey. But we've now gone from 8 teams, I think it was at the time, to 30 now, and it's all really because of the way we've gone about things.
It's absolutely incredible to hear that story. And as you alluded to there, the success that you've experienced is because of the way that you've gone about things. And we're going to dig into the details of that, because I think between yourself and Rick, there are many tips that lots of football clubs across the country could benefit from. On that note, let me bring Rick into the fold as well to find out a little bit more. Because Rick, I know you take a bit of a lead on all things marketing, and quite similar to Trevor, your story and your involvement with AFC Henley revolved around your sons at the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. I mean, compared to Trevor, I am a complete newcomer. I've been here for about 3 or 4 years. And as you say, I've got 2 boys. I've got Harry, who's age 10, and Charlie, who's aged 8. And I've been going down to AFC Henley for probably about 3 or 4 years now. Trevor is there week in, week out, rain or shine. He greets people on the door. And then we just got talking, and he mentioned, would I be interested in helping out with some of the strategic thinking, marketing and branding of the club. And I was just kind of happy to get involved, really.
Well, it's brilliant. And I think those kind of conversations that happen between parents and volunteers, those little welcomes, how are you? They do then lead. And obviously, Trevor, you spotted a potential volunteer in your midst. And I understand you're kind of going for a bit of a rebrand at the moment. Can you quickly just tell us a little bit more about that, Rick?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's something that, I don't know, I'm wearing club colours at the moment. I'll just try and get the badge in, kind of just up here. And I think, just picking up where Trevor left off earlier, I think probably the founding of the club, they didn't give an awful lot of thought to the branding and, what it needed to be. And it's been kind of like this for about 20 odd years, as he said. We've done a huge amount of work on our vision and mission recently. And we're getting to the end of that. And what we're saying now is, well, okay, how do we kind of move our branding on? How do we make it kind of modern, relevant, maybe a bit more inclusive? I think our branding it's very nice. I said, to Trevor, we've got kind of the star, but it's generally, does it kind of represent our club? Does it represent our community? If you were to look at it, would you get, other than the fact it says AFC Henley on it, would you know that it's AFC Henley? So that's the conversation that we've been having. We've got some exciting ideas of how we want to progress it.
It's a really important conversation to have because identity and marketing kind of do split into two different pillars, because your identity is all about what you stand for within your local community. And Trevor, I wanted to ask you a bit more about the model that you've built for success around the sort of mini soccer. It sounded like at the very start that was the key to unlocking the opportunities, and you spoke about how it's grown since then. Can you tell us about that model and how?
Yes, well, it's a very successful model at all levels, really. The first thing is we've made a point of making it the entry-level product for the club. So it is a bit like a loss leader in retailing, but this is an entry-level product. We decided to let the under fives in for nothing for the first term. And that because it's a numbers game essentially. So this would help us build up the numbers. We also decided to make it pay as you go, so it's a completely commitment-free kind of operation. So any parent coming through didn't feel saddled with having to pay an upfront fee for a term or a year, which they experience at other clubs, they tell me, and they're very grateful for the opportunity just to come and go as they please. So it's a nil commitment product basically, and then we bring in experienced coaches. So we have academy coaches from Reading, we've had academy coaches from Oxford, and we've had guys who work in Reading Football Club's Community Trust, which is the programme that looks into deprived areas of Reading and lays on soccer schools and things. So we employ really good coaches. And then we also sort of make it fun. Basically, we want the kids to enjoy their football in a pressure-free environment. So we don't allow them to go anywhere near league football until they're under 9. So the mini soccer centre has effectively been the kind of preschool from under 5 to under 8, where there's no competitive football, just coaching with friendly games for the last half hour of the session, and that's basically it. And when we get to under 8, depending on the numbers, we start streaming them into ability levels and start preparing them for league football under 9. We start recruiting volunteers from amongst the parents to take over the coaching, and then we register them for the league, and off they go. And so many of them would have had 4 years of fun football under young, sort of communicative coaches who look after them very nicely, and the parents love it. We get very nice comments on the gate, and yeah, it's just, and it also, by the way, it makes money for us, and it makes money for the coaches. We pay our coaches something like £10 an hour if they're level 1, £15 an hour if they're level 2, and £25 an hour if they're level 3.
There are so many things in that answer that are really, really good to hear. The idea as well that the model works in terms of the player is at the heart of it. It's all about the player having fun, but also you've got that model of financial sustainability that's so important. Often when you talk to volunteers and people across the game, they speak about this idea of creating a culture, and it can sound like something that looks quite nice on a piece of paper, but at AFC Henley, that culture is genuine. It's a part of the fabric of you and your identity. And Rick mentioned that he spoke to you on the gate when dropping his sons off to a session. You mentioned speaking to parents, and I understand it's only until recently that every Saturday morning you were there on the gate. And in some respects, does that underpin the identity of the football club, in the respect that there is someone there, there's a friendly face,
Absolutely.
in a certain tone that you want AFC Henley to represent to its community?
Yeah, we make a point of making it really easy for people. If they turn up with no money, we say, well, don't worry, just pay us next week. If they turn up with £1 short, we say, well, don't worry about it. The odd pound is neither here nor there. We just make it as easy as possible for people to get what they want, and it just builds up goodwill.
It's really refreshing to hear. And I suppose from your point of view, Rick, taking a lead on this rebrand, when you have that sort of culture there to work off of, where there is such a clear sense of identity, and you mentioned the mission and values as well, is this sort of rebrand, the marketing side of it, just the kind of creative reimagination of what is just kind of being done on a Saturday and throughout the week?
Yeah, and I mean, that's exactly it. So examples like kind of Trevor being there, he is the face of AFC Henley. I said, it's really important when I met him. I don't think he realised just kind of the impact he has, kind of being there week in, week out. And some of those kind of little values that you see coming through. So don't worry about the pound. If you need to pay us next week, that's fine. So, when we start to talk about branding and we start to kind of have a strategy for the club, it's things like that that really kind of shine through, and that we're really keen to kind of keep and make sure that, it really embodies our club. So, things like that really strong community spirit that we have, it all comes from, the behaviours that Trevor kind of instills in the committee, and, we try and coach into the kids.
Yeah, having a chairman who's happy to be that visible is obviously a massive strength of the football club. And I wanted to ask you, Trevor, as well, that kind of culture, that identity and that purpose from the sort of mini soccer centres, how do you keep that going throughout the different age groups as well? Because I know when I speak to different volunteers at different sort of England accredited football clubs, sometimes they find little drop-offs in different age groups and so on, but there seems to be a real kind of strong player pathway. How do you keep that going?
Well, I suppose if you talk about phases, the mini soccer centre is essentially was the first phase in our sort of transformation, and it kind of set the tone in terms of the community and the kind of messages we want to get across about being accessible and friendly and all that kind of stuff. But then we found, because we were creating more teams every year, because at under 8 we were getting more and more kids in, and we were finding that we were creating not just one team but 2 or 3. Then we realised there was a problem in terms of managing teams. How do you manage an age group and to make sure that kids are being treated properly, they're in the right place for them, from an ability point of view? Are the coaches talking to each other? Do some coaches put their arms around the team and say, my team and no one else can come near me? So what we did, we created the role of an age group manager. And so each age group's got an age group manager, not fixed for that year. They normally move up with their age group. And the idea was that the manager would then, based on the consensus approach, would pull the managers together as one team, and they would all train together midweek, for example. They might split off into their respective teams at some point, but they would start off together as one single entity. And the idea being that if there was any necessity for players to move from one team to another, there wouldn't be a massive argument about it. It would be done on a consensus basis. There'd be a meeting at the beginning of the season, make sure all the kids were in the right place. So they would balance up the numbers and balance up the quality, and some people would be promoted to a stronger team, some would have to be moved down to a less strong team, and then maybe halfway through the year they have a review of that as well. And we issue very, very detailed guidance on that. We have a document that goes out to the age groups saying this is how you manage your teams, and these are the principles we apply. This is what you have to do. No child should be left without a game or without training. If a player's unable to get into a team, we offer them training only, so they can train with the squad, and then hope that at some point a slot comes up for them to actually join a team. So it's all inclusive, and everybody's getting a chance to do what they want to do, which is to play football.
Teamwork, transparency, and good communication seem like three absolute non-negotiables for the football club, as part of your identity, and of course part of your football development as well. And it's nice to see that sort of overlap. I wanted to ask Rick a quick question about some of the work you're doing with the Rebrand now, and the vision and mission. And I just wondered, quite a lot of clubs want to create an identity for themselves. They know what they stand for, they live and breathe it, and then you ask them something like, do you have a vision or a mission statement? And they get a little bit, you can see the face drop, and they find it quite intimidating. I wondered, firstly, what kind of language have you decided on using for this rebrand? And I suppose, secondly, any tips you'd give for clubs watching that know they can do it, but perhaps it's the first time they've done so and taken that first step?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of what you're touching on is, you have to kind of get your foundations right. You have to get kind of the core right. And, you really look at the kind of the culture and the values of the club to do that. So I'm going to have to read from the screen in a minute because it's quite long. But, when we're talking about our vision that Trevor and myself and the rest of the committee kind of fed into is we're quite clear. We want to be the premier community football club in South Oxfordshire, and the first choice for players and parents. So, that's quite a clear, what we want to achieve. And then really digging into the detail around that, we came up with a bit of a mission statement. And again, that's kind of, it really kind of is how we already operate as a club, but we kind of wanted to kind of really get it down and crystallize it. And that's to inspire personal growth and development in young people through football, to help our players build up their confidence and their self-esteem while they're learning skills and behaviours that will help them kind of throughout their lives. And then again, kind of really how we operate day to day, but be inclusive of everyone in our community, regardless of their nationality, their colour, their background, or their religion. So really kind of, I wouldn't say it wrote itself, but, we kind of talked about how do we run the club day to day, and then started to kind of, write that down, and capture it in a statement. And like you said there, you might have a brand, and for a lot of people people think about kind of brands as just like a logo or some colors or, other distinctive assets, but that kind of comes later. And what we've been talking about, kind of Trevor and the rest of the committee, is okay. So, how do we take what we've got? Really start to look at what we've got. And again, it might not seem like much, but, you actually start to dig into it. There's a lot there. So we've kind of got our red and black colors. We've got kind of the roundel. There's some stripes and a star on it. But then when you start to dig into it and you say, well, maybe at first glance you go, well, does it say Henley? Would you get Henley from that? Maybe not. But you can start to dig into it and you can say, well, the star is really important. It's on right in the center of our logo. And we also use it for a lot of our kind of player of the weeks. We have a trophy and it's got a star on it. So things like that you can take and you can work with. And I think the star is going to feature in the future logo. I think we're going to maybe play with some of the colors. I think we're very dark at the moment. But I mean, all of this is kind of just the aesthetic, that comes later. I think the important thing that we were talking about earlier is get your foundations right. And then the rest of it is a little bit more straightforward.
Absolutely. The point you make about writing the mission statement, the vision and so on, is that it's not an easy thing to do, but it was slightly more seamless because you had such a strong identity as a foundation to work off of. And you also made the point about values, which is also a key part of an identity and also a marketing feature as well. Trevor, when we talk about values, what are the key ones for AFC Henley when it comes to someone asking you about your football club? How would you describe the key values and drivers?
Well, I've got a few things that I think are important when you're running an organisation, but I'll preface what I say with that. I think the three very important things to do when you're trying to build an organisation and get people attracted to you is you've got to look extremely professional, even if you're an amateur. And in fact, the more amateur you are, the more professional you have to look. And because it's all about perception. If you look good, people assume things are good behind the scenes. Then you should major on quality. If you're going to provide a product like the mini soccer centre, make it a quality product, because quality sells itself. And then on top of that, just be nice to people. So those three things together make it very easy to build things. But on top of that, our message really is about putting the player first. We're child-centric. We prioritise development over trophies. We focus on long-term growth rather than short-termism. And it's very important, as we've done, is to decide on the basic principles of what you want to do as a club. We've got our principles cast in stone now. But it's important to establish what you really believe you're doing and then capture these in a mission and vision statement. And in our case, we've gone a step further and developed a 5-year plan with targets, for various years. Then so we've got something to work with and gives us a real framework.
Yeah, such incredibly strong practice to have those values, and what echoes across to me, having only really kind of found out about your football club recently, is just to hear that mantra of putting the player first, of having fun, of being inclusive and actually delivering it, because it's very easy to say it, but then when it comes down to a match, a whistle gets blown and then things get competitive. But the fact that you've backed that up further by giving the coaches all the right communications and making sure that the parents are aware of that, it's really fantastic. Time is running away with us, as it always does, but I wanted to pick up a little bit more around this rebrand and the process that it has gone through, because we've spoken about the vision and mission statement and how that is key, and then Rick, you were making some points about the aesthetics as well, and Trevor alludes to the point that if you look the part when you're going around, if your website looks good, if your logo and brand and colours look bright and attractive, it does make a difference. So can you just kind of bring us up with the very latest of where you're at the stage of development?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what Trevor's saying there. I think, it goes an awful long way. I think you have to look the part. And I think, it's a big challenge for all brands, whether you're kind of the Nikes of the world, you have to stay modern, you have to stay up to speed with the times, and you have to really kind of make sure that you're relevant and you're appealing to your consumers. And I think this is where, Trevor's been, quite forward thinking, really. We've done all this great work. We know that we're a great club, but we don't want to be complacent. We've got really, really big plans. And I think it's a really smart move to, start to think about our brand and start to think about making sure that it's, it's modern and it's relevant, and that it looks good when we communicate on digital channels like social media. It's early days at the moment. We're actually kind of in this kind of consultation phase. We're sharing this kind of idea. We're getting feedback from the committee. We're getting feedback from our parents and some of our players. In due course, we'll do that too. Like I say, we're trying to make it distinctive and unique, and it's kind of really ownable. I really want to, when you look at it, and we'll share it in future when it's ready, but you want to be able to see and go, yes, that's AFC Henley.
Yeah. Can we get the first reveal? Can Tom and I come down for an episode of In the Box? A big reveal.
Yeah,
of the rebrand?
absolutely. Yeah, you're more
brilliant.
Because I think that the thing that comes across to me as well is that with the rebrand, it's about trying to make the assets distinctive, like your football club is distinctive. And because your football club has gone on this journey, its identity is strengthened, and now you're in a position to perhaps, again, consult with people, which is fantastic, because sometimes it could be so easy to just kind of write your own ideas down and do what you think might be best. But actually the fact that you're consulting with people as well is another little bit of fantastic advice that hopefully other volunteers can take away. Trevor, any sort of final tips from you? Because obviously you're the chairman whose focus has to be spread out across so many different things. What pieces of advice would you give to clubs when it comes to this subject of really building a strong identity?
I think you just have to be clear on what your objectives are and what you're trying to do. I think going back to the points I made earlier, you need to establish some values for yourself, as we have, and then you have to find a way of getting other people on board with those values. And I suppose, we've had to get rid of one or two people who haven't complied with our ethos, who are disruptive. Not everybody goes along with what you want to do, but you need to bring everybody on board so you've got a critical mass of people that believe in what you're doing. I think that's very important. And then you have to be organised. I mean, you obviously need need the manpower in place to implement what you're trying to do. So you need a good committee of people. I've got an 11-person committee at the moment, and it's still not enough people, to be honest, for what we're trying to do. So it's a challenge. I mean, the big problem for any club is how do you get people to do things when they're volunteers and you can't really direct them in as if you were in the workplace. It's all done on goodwill. But you have to generate an atmosphere of goodwill and encourage people to contribute. That's all we can do, really.
Absolutely. And I think it is really good advice and insight, again, to end this episode of Extra Time on. I'd just like to thank you, Trevor and Rick, for giving up your time. I know it's incredibly precious and you give up many hours of it at AFC Henley, but I think the insight and advice that you've given through the experience of being involved in the football club will help so many others. And we will be chasing that invite for the launch of the rebrand. I can't wait to see it. Best of luck with it all. And thank you once again for coming on this episode of
Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And if you would like to discover some more resources, hear from incredible volunteers like Trevor and Rick, then don't forget to have a bit more of an explore of our Leagues and Clubs Hub on YouTube. You can find many discussions, webinars and so on there. And also make sure that you join us on Clubhouse. You can connect with volunteers from across the country, pose questions, share best practice, and access a whole range of free resources to help your football club and league become the very best version of itself, whether that is focusing around your identity, marketing, finance, governance, you name it, there will be support there for you. Until next time, take good care. Goodbye.